Today, we'll be hosting a discussion between our members and some of the UK's leading industry professionals about the current and future state of the broadcasting world. Later, we'll be talking with Laura Offer, Nick Hutchings, Matt Graf, and Klaus Friedrichsen. But we'll start our first roundtable event with DOP Ollie Wiggins, Director Marcus Liversedge, DOP Will Churchill, and International Media Consultant Hannah Demidovic. Now, Ollie Wiggins has been a cinematographer for over 25 years, starting out in single-camera PSC entertainment. He has continued to develop his skills and now spreads his time between commercials, comedy, and music videos. 20 years ago, he set up the camera hire and crewing company S&O, but more recently, he was awarded a GTC award for excellence for his work on the BBC series I'll Get This. Before we speak to Ollie, let's have a look at a clip from I'll Get This.
First of all, I'd say thank you to the GTC for the award.
Welcome, diners.
Please place your credit cards in the bowl in the centre of the table.
How important is the relationship you have with the director, and how can that affect how you work?
Come on, mate.
Spicing things
It's vital. It's taken. I think it takes a long time for you to build up trust with any director. I still think it's a wonderful challenge to work with new directors because they often take you out of your comfort zone. But there's something you get your most when you work with someone who trusts you to do your job. Hopefully, they're picking you for the right reasons. But with Marcus, I think I hope that we work together as a good team. I think I like to be across all of the editorial stuff. So whatever I'm doing, whether it be lighting or camera positioning or just the whole sort of feel of visuals, sits very well with where production wants to come from. So he kind of, in a way, is often the sort of go-between between the camera and lighting department, me, and obviously the execs and the commissioners. So having someone who is fighting for you in terms of what you're trying to achieve, but also making sure that it's something that production want is vital.
Okay, and with I'll Get This in mind, you obviously talked quite closely with Marcus about how you're going to shoot it and the lighting and things. Can you just run us through your thoughts on what cameras you chose, why you chose the particular cameras, and also a bit more on the lighting? And was there quite a tight budget to go with, or did you have a bit more of a free rein on that?
I suppose I'll start with budget. It's often the starting point for a lot of decisions, especially in sort of the TV world. So on this one, we had shot the pilot and we knew that the format worked, and that was kind of an important start. And then, so when it got commissioned, it was more about tweaking. I think we shot the pilot on different cameras. I pushed, and Marcus wanted to shoot them on the ARRI cameras. So we had a mix of ARRI Amiras and Minis. That just allowed me straight away to, I feel very comfortable with that camera. I've been using it since, the first Alexa came out. So in terms of lighting, knowing its dynamic range, its color, and it's a very simple camera to sort of set up and get shooting. And I think I started many years back when there was just one kind of, if you worked in TV, there was one or two video cameras, and it was very easy to get to know the ropes with those cameras. Nowadays, there's new cameras come out every year, couple of years. So you're always having to learn new menu systems. So the ARRI camera has been a wonderful conception by ARRI in the sense that it's stayed the same for the last probably about 8-9 years, is it now, since the first Alexa came out? So it's good to stay with that. You know exactly what you're doing. You know exactly how it's going to respond to color and light, and that makes it a great start. So for this, the lighting was the starting point. Once I recce the location, Marcus had very much pushed for this to feel a little bit more dramatic, even though it is in essence a sort of a game show shot on location. Marcus and production wanted this to feel very real and quite dramatic. So we had to push for lighting it that way, and that we can see once I sort of saw the location. it was kind of building up the main space, which was the table. And for that, we rigged stairs into the ceiling. By chance, there was a very convenient mounting point in the ceiling. And so I decided that that was where the table was going to sit. And then everything else kind of went around that. So there was a couple of Aladdins on which were armed. No, they weren't. They came straight down, and then we built a sort of a pelmet. And Sally Lott, the art director, made a pelmet, which you can see there. Yes, the pelmet, and that allowed me to hide the lights on the wide shot. So on some of the wide shots, you see that base, and so it looked like a real sort of fixture light that you might see in a restaurant over a table. Then I diffused it again, so it was double diffused, and then we cut a hole out in the middle, which allowed us to put an A7S, which gave us the sort of wonderful top-down shot. And that camera was the only one, I think, that we shot in 4K, which gave us enough space for them to do a little rotation in post when they sort of zoomed in. The rest of the lighting was just sort of reinforcing the practicals that were there, adding practicals with dados. And then there was a little push, even though it was all shot at night, we just pushed a bit of sort of moonlight through some windows. And then there was a Noctodome sitting off set that sort of lights people as they walk in. So it was fairly straightforward. Actually, I think the actual intro scene where people walk into the restaurant is a slightly bigger lighting setup. And that was just people walking in from outside. So we had some HMIs outside and some sort of gem balls lighting above. And then once they walked inside, we rigged a lot of the stairs into the ceiling. I think when I first started, the stairs had just come out. Sorry, the Astera AX1s had just come out. So that was really useful. And then again, it's just sort of adding to what, when you're on a location like that, you've got to see the practicals, work with those practicals. If they work, you're either modifying them or you're replacing them in its entirety, but then, also staying within the budget. So it's that sort of constant yin and yang of all the different things and making them all work. And thankfully with this one, they embraced the look that I went for. Marcus was as supportive as ever, and production really loved it. And I think, it works as a show. It feels very natural. And also because there was no visible sort of lights in shot, it allowed, I think, the on-screen talent to just relax into what was a meal with a lot of drinks for some of them, enjoying themselves and playing these parlor games.
It certainly worked really well, and you didn't get any feeling of being able to see any other than the cameras, and you got that great feeling of just like being there and eavesdropping in on these conversations. So it certainly worked for that. Just before we go to Marcus, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. I'm sure Marcus will have a lot to
add. Okay, well, that seems to be a good time to bring in Marcus. Now, Marcus started directing and writing in TV for the BBC. He won an International Emmy in 2007 and did some commercials in 2009, and has since directed more than 100 of those in the UK, so he certainly knows what he's doing. The majority of the stuff he's done is scripted, and he's worked with Ollie, as we've already said, for many years now, formed a great partnership. He directed a scripted drama promo for Amazon Prime for the American Gods series launch, which also received a lot of acclaim. He directed series 1 and 2 of both comedies Almost Royal for BBC America, and of course, I'll Get This for BBC Two. Marcus, welcome.
Graham, hello.
Thanks for joining us on our first roundtable. I'm sorry if we've had a few glitches here and there, but I think from what I'm hearing, things are smoothing out now, and it's all going well. So what's it like working with our lovely Ollie?
I've worked with Ollie Wiggins. I mean, I think we first met when we were pops, really, back at MTV in the studios in Camden. I think probably like 1998, 1999. So I've worked with him for over 20 years now, and and that's kind of gone from music television to story to comedy to scripted, and as you said, to commercials. We've done quite a lot of commercials in the last 4 or 5 years together, and I think all of those entities bring a kind of we've got a great shorthand together, but we also, I think, we like to mix our ideas so that something from commercial can come into TV and something from TV can come in to commercial. And on this particular project, I think Ollie kind of, hit the nail on the head there, is that it felt, and so did you, is that it felt very, very real. I mean, this was, in the original brief from BBC Two and 12 Yards, our exec, Matt Walton, wanted it to look, like a drama, to have kind of like a lock stock feel, as he said, whilst also knowing that this is a games and competition format for BBC Two. So you've got quite an interesting brief there. And what I think is also very interesting is that Ollie obviously can brilliantly light studio, but I think lighting location that is like half location, half studio, with the build that was done by production designer Sally Lott, is not an easy thing to light and to make it feel real. So you're taking a real place, making it better for TV, but still making it light and feel real. So I think here, Ollie having the cameras that he discussed, but also using them long lens. So the cameras were quite a way back from the talent. So the talent could feel as if they were left alone to enjoy this meal and have a few drinks and to also play these key parlor games. So that was interesting. But I think it brings it back to the reality, is like there is an element of reality when you're not in a studio, when you're in a real location, is that the talent coming to you in the evening for a meal and playing games and in a real location, is that I think the talent gets to feel that this is super real. And when they haven't seen anyone from production, or they haven't seen me for a bit because we're just letting it run, albeit long lens and very creatively, is that it starts to feel like a very different, new, real format. It's like a format that you've always known in a way, because it has so many elements that dive into the real. And I know later
Marcus,
on
if I can just interrupt there for a minute, what was this originally scheduled to be in a studio, and then you had to adapt because of COVID, or was this pre-COVID? And so
this was shot. Both series. No, it's a good question. Both series were shot pre-COVID. What happened was there was a 6x30, but BBC Two loved it so much they expanded it in the edit to make it 6x45 as well, to fit their slots. But we always wanted it to be in a restaurant because we just wanted to have that real feeling. Hence why all the B-roll of people dining there, waiters arriving, waiters working, the talent arriving from outside. It's shot in a restaurant called Devonshire Terrace near Liverpool Street. That is a kind of very much a city restaurant. So we would shoot in it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because it was very popular Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
And did you have to take the rig out between shoots for them to operate at the weekend, or could you leave the main lighting rig in, for instance?
No, and then again, this is the brilliant work by Ollie and his S&O team and production designer Sally Lott, is that we took over the bar area and built a private diner's room. So if you go to Devonshire Terrace, and I hear people are going there looking to book this private diner's room, that doesn't exist because we built it into the bar area by using two fake walls, which were brilliantly designed around the design that's already inherently in the location. Which is why, Graham, I've always said to you, I'm a big fan of location shooting in the UK, especially with studios so booked up at the moment that IGT's thinking is a very adaptable way of building new formats in what is essentially a real environment that we de-rigged 3 times in 3 weeks.
Yeah, so hard work for the team to get it all in and out and keep it looking the same as well, I guess, but well worth it in the end. So any other projects you've got coming up?
There is, strangely enough, there's another one that's coming up soon, which is for BritBox. So that's a streamer, and again, one that they're very influenced by. I'll get there. So it for me feels like there's still quite a lot of work around, but you've got to be inventive. I think I'll get this is, as I say, shot in location, and there's another job we're looking at which has got the same sensibility, and again the same problem of studio location. And I think during COVID, being as though so many locations are closed to the public, I think you have a wealth of inventive, creative places that you can go to film in if you just really search for them, because they are all empty, and I think that gives you new visual creative looks. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'll get
I
this
know
is
from
still
my own experience that we've managed to the little bits of filming I've done, we've actually managed to get in some amazing places like the V&A, for instance, which you'd never get
yeah,
into in a million years
exactly.
during the day normally. And it gives you a great scope and like some really beautiful places that, you know, if production teams are on it, that they can do. Maybe we bring Ollie back in as well. Ollie, just talking about lighting and the places that you can go to. Was there anything in particular that you loved about the restaurant?
The restaurant, no, the restaurant was kind of, it wasn't that special. We kind of made it that by, I think, just once we put in a strong light above, everything else was dimmed down. And it was more the fact that the work Sally did in terms of building the flats that hid all the cameras. Once you built that, it was quite easy to light. I think, you know, if you have good art direction, lighting is much more straightforward. And, you know, you just have to, you know, worry about lighting the people so they look beautiful, you know, and then just light the background enough so people can see.
Okay, just a quick reminder to people that if you've got any questions to ask that you want to ask Ollie or Marcus before we move on to Will Churchill, who's going to be our next guest, let us know, because we can pass those on and ask them now. Other than that, Marcus, what about, you know, things coming up, COVID problems? Are you finding it restrictive?
I mean, I think a lot of people will find that obviously where productions are delayed by 2 to 3 months, that's a real difficulty. That's as bad as a cancellation if you've planned and prepped for it. But again, I would say that my two penneth is that I'll get this thinking, adapting new locations, maybe changing your creative slightly to work into a real environment as opposed to a studio. As we all know, British studios are so booked up at the moment, yet we have so much brilliant British filming talent. There's so many great DPs and operators and sound supers and sound mixers and art and production design in this country that I feel that if you're my two penneth to the commissioners would be that if you can't get that commission across the line using the way you've always used, maybe it's just time to think around the subject and to use, you know, a new location and a new filming approach. Ollie will tell you about a commercial that we shot remotely whilst being 10 to 15 meters away from vulnerable talent. And again, you can always find a way to get around it if you just involve the creatives early on to come up with solutions. I mean, what can it hurt?
And Ollie, with your own company rather than just you yourself, what have you found a struggle like with making sure everything's COVID safe, and are you having to put a lot of new things into place?
Yes, that I mean, I mean now everything's in place, but back kind of April, May last year when work started, I mean, the company itself never closed, so we were still kind of running on a much more sort of skeletal crew, which allowed us to sort of start to work out all our health and safety protocols. So I think to start with, it was working out how the building and the people working the building were safe, and obviously the kit going out was safe. And then, like Marcus said, it was then working on projects to work out how you could go out and film different scenarios and make sure those are safe. Obviously, that carried on. I think I remember getting a call in I think it was March, and about a comedy, a sort of scripted sketch show I was working on, or due to work on. I said, look, that's never going to happen. That job just never going to go ahead with COVID. And come beginning of July, it was all commissioned and we were sort of filming, and that was my sort of first sort of proper on set, 5 days a week with a COVID officer, and it was, and obviously distancing as well, distancing yourself, distancing actors. That was obviously a challenge. So it was changing how you shot things, what worked, but still, without it looking ridiculously weird. People sitting 2 meters away. So you had to sort of just change angles, camera angles, and just be a little bit smart and clever about it. And then work really just took over for myself, but also for S&O. It was a very, the last sort of 6 months of the year were as busy as any other year. Currently, it's very quiet, but I think that is because of the time of year, and I think there is a lot of difficulty in people getting permission. So there's very little street filming happening at the moment. If you're in a studio, it's fine, you can control it, it's safe. But I don't think it's either clients who are paying money or commissioners or anyone feels happy filming out on the streets at the moment when everyone else is meant to be locked at home. So out of the way, staying safe. So it sort of feels weird filming at the moment if you are out and about, and I think that's why there isn't that much of that work happening at the moment, and I don't expect it really to pick up for at least another month or until we're released into a new tiered system, and then hopefully that will give us confidence and producers and everyone to sort of get back out and get filming.
Ollie, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope the work picks up. It's presumably a little bit like me, that you're probably looking after all your gear and making sure it's all ready. And if not that, you're being forced into DIY projects at home. Marcus, again, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to introduce Will Churchill now to join us. Will, I'm sure a lot of you will know, is a DOP and GTC member based in London, but he works mainly in documentary and entertainment. He's also very experienced in drama and corporate as well. His career has taken him to every corner of the globe, working in the most dangerous and hostile environments, as well as many dynamic and more conservative locations. So 25 years or so experience. Will, how are things with you?
Things are, well, the same as everyone else, I suppose. We're sort of battling on with this whole situation, adapting and moving along. Yeah, it's, I must admit this, I do apologize. Usually I'm behind the camera, so it's not as easy as it looks. So I apologize to all the presenters I've been, I've tutted at. I think I just want to sort of really just talk about my journey going into the freelancing world. At the start. So I started off in a facility company, and when I left college, and then I became a camera assistant, and then at about 28 years old, I became a junior cameraman, and then from then on, it was just all word by mouth, which was great. I got a big break working for Ross Kemp in his several dangerous documentaries around the world, and which I saw pretty much the worst of humanity, really. As a documentary cameraman, it's an interesting job, very sad, but it was one of those things straight out as a DOP to be able to see those, see the different contrasts in the world. I saw genocide, gang warfare, pirates, drug cartels, sort of a nice mix. Then I saw the best of humanity. So I worked with Joanna Lumley, who invited me around to travel around the globe with her. We made about 30 hours of documentaries, like including the Nile, the Silk Road, Japan, really angry Russian border guards, and the Dalai Lama. So a nice mix of work, which was great. Before the COVID lockdown happened, in 2019, I was filming mostly documentaries. So I think I did about 18 countries for different clients, without and sort of roughly I was out the country for about 30 weeks, which is quite a long time to spend away. And that sort of workload, I was sort of in the groove of just going away all the time, which is fine. You have to be very organized. Obviously, grandma sucking eggs here for some of the the members. But you know, my wife is amazing. Sarana was absolutely amazing about looking at that, and she still is amazing when it comes to me going away. The beginning of 2020, though, I was working for a Nat Geo program with Gordon Ramsay called Uncharted, and it was a 7-week. It was 7-week. It was a 7-week block, and we did 4 countries in that. So we did Tasmania, Indonesia, India, and then Ghana in South America. And we had like an 8-man crew. It was a big production. And we had like 3 cameras on Gordon all the time, and we were doing stunts like jumping out of helicopters and fishing, and you know, being bitten by piranhas, you know, all that kind of, you know, the usual thing you do. And we picked up crew members all the way along. It was great, and the rest of the year was looking pretty good actually. You know, it was that job there which was going to carry on, and lots of other bits and pieces with Joanna Lumley and stuff. We were going to go away, and then lockdown happened. And it was, as you can imagine, it was quite frantic for my workload to suddenly just absolutely stop. And I think I could probably speak for most of my mates in the industry that it was absolutely crushing. It was really just a complete sideswipe, and people were just turned upside down. Jobs were being cancelled every day, you know. And you know, for freelancers, we know how it feels when a job does actually then get taken away from you. And yeah, this time everybody was in the mix, and some people still are, you know, sporting cameramen and stuff who I know quite well. They're having a terrible time because the events they would go away for such a large chunk of time, and that the whole year would be booked up, and they would start in March and finish in November. And some of my friends have only done maybe a month in the last year, which is, you know, obviously they've done other bits and pieces along the way, but you know, this is sort of the situation that freelancers find themselves in. So I suppose surviving COVID, as all the jobs have, well, for me anyway, I've been given a couple of jobs or hints of jobs, and it's the usual Cameron thing. Oh yeah, that job. Yeah, I was offered it first, but I turned it down. But one of them was to go to China, and it was going to have to quarantine for 2 weeks, and then we would then work. We would be assumably be able to work freely within China, and then I don't know whether or not we would have to then quarantine when we came back to England. You know, it was all that one of those sort of. It was a strange job, really, and unfortunately I can't do that to my wife and kids, because that's like 8 weeks suddenly, or 8 or 9 weeks, and you know, amazing job. But no, I think that's, you know, when you've got young children, it's not great. So I started working a lot in the UK, or should I say not a lot, but the jobs that we got, I felt it was a lot through the COVID times. And for example, I worked with Joanna Lumley. She's got a TV series at the moment on ITV, and so the first one went out on Tuesday, and it's a big sell here. But the adaptation between working with Joanna, which usually we go away for long periods of time to go and do a project, we were doing it in England, and we would go away as a group. We would get tested at the beginning, we would do the job, and then we'd go get tested at the end. And we were very diligent about shooting 80% outside. So the UK, that does become a bit difficult, as you know, because the weather is the weather sometimes isn't great, but we had great weather. We were very blessed. I didn't have to worry about carnets. I didn't have to worry about jet lag. I didn't have to worry about any 2-week quarantine coming back. You know, there was lots of travel, and well, okay, it wasn't that hard to adapt. It was actually a breath of fresh air, really, going around a country which I love and adore. I think,
it must really also be quite nice to know that, like, all the flight cases that you put in the van are going to be there when you arrive in Manchester, whereas when you put them on at Heathrow, you're never quite sure whether they're going to be there when you get to wherever you're going. Also, yeah, it's the usual thing that you do realize which kit you don't use. It's quite interesting, or you're not allowed to use, or you know, when you go away, you just go, okay, that hasn't come out of the box, or that's still got labels on it, it's still got the tape on it from Heathrow, and we've done a 2-week job and we've come back and it's still on there.
But the great thing is that when we would go away on jobs, we can't take all these toys. I think, Graham, we were talking about earlier on, is that you want to take, well, I tell you what, we could take all this other kit. We could take a slider, we could take the primes and all that kind of stuff. We can make it look, just give me 5 minutes. But a lot of the time we don't have time, obviously, because other things, we've got to travel, we've got to do all these bits and pieces. So actually it was quite nice to be in England to be able to take the jib, the slider, the primes. Okay, they didn't come out that often because, the nature of the filming is always there anyway. But yeah, I think I'm really positive and optimistic about the future of filming, and whether or not that means vaccine passports and good bill of health. I don't know whether that's just wishful thinking. I'm not sure, but I would sort of give some advice to people who are starting off in freelance. It's not for everyone, and at the moment it probably feels even worse because you've probably gone, either you've come out of a facility company or you've gone freelance from working in a company. It's the advantage is you are your own boss, fine, and you decide that the projects that you can sort of choose and pick, which doesn't really happen until you're a lot later on down your career path. You start picking and choosing jobs, and the important things in life you can dedicate yourself to without anybody really telling you what to do, apart from the production and on the job, obviously. I think.
Okay, well, I think things have changed a little, haven't they, since the old days of being freelance as well, where you just had your landline as well, where you'd maybe go home and go, oh no, there's still dialing tone. So it's like, why isn't someone phoning me? But anyway, let's bring back Ollie and Marcus and join in here with Will. Sorry, Will, were you going to make? There was another point you were going to make just then, I think.
Oh no! I think let's be on, because I'll start talking forever, and it's probably best if we bring other people into it.
So, Marcus, going back to the COVID thing, I know Will's had to change a lot of what he's doing. You've talked about it briefly as well. Where do we go from here, do you think?
I think the clever, progressive way forward is just to find inventive ways to do our creative endeavor, to make it completely safe as it's always been. I think, especially in this country, we've always been very good at risk assessment procedure. I think that is now in the lifeblood of all DPs, producers that I work with, that we're always careful and cautious and plan anyway. We never go anywhere without a plan. So I think it's just better planning, like I've said, about creative thinking, creative booking, locations, and building those formats that, again, like that Will was talking about with Joanna. Was that a Burning Bright production, Will?
Yes, I believe Clive Tullow.
I do indeed.
It was.
Amazing man, brilliant man. Me and Ollie did Almost Royal for him, and we did 2 series.
Did you?
And he's
Fan.
Again, yeah, he's just someone that he's very inventive about the formats that he pitches to broadcasters. And I think you could take Joanna anywhere, but if you can't take her everywhere, if you can take her somewhere, you're still going to get a brilliant production, because she is amazing talent like there's never been talent before. So I think that it's just that, for me, the creative thinking for broadcasters and the commissioners working within broadcasters, and also production companies pitching ideas that are doable but inventive, but can still carry on after the COVID days, so they don't feel like they were a COVID production. I think it's about inventiveness.
Yeah, and one of the things that at the GTC we've been very much at the forefront of in recent years is the mental health issues with our mental health supplements. Will, to go from having so much work to start with so little, how do you cope with that, and do you have any advice for other members?
Well, primarily, yes, it was a big shock, and it didn't really hit me until probably a month into not having any work, because then the realization of not having any work there, and then you start thinking, well, has anybody else got any work? And the freelance paranoia starts taking over. And I think one of the things I had, because I've got, I think some people got agents, some people got diary services, some people got WhatsApp groups. I think talking to people, Linkline, who I'm my diary service, they were instrumental in helping me. Well, beforehand, I think freelancers are very well equipped to take knocks. So you'll be put up for a job, and then they'll then go, "Oh, we've gone with someone else," or "It's gone away," and it's always that sort of that little inkling. And I don't think you ever get used to it, that the job goes away and you feel, okay, I feel deflated. Fine, build yourself up, off you go again. With this was completely, there was nothing in the horizon, and being able to talk to people, I think is really important, and who understands it, you know, because some people just roll their eyes or go, yeah, that's great, you know, I don't really understand because I'm not in your industry. But yeah, Linkline were brilliant to be able to get some perspective on what's going on around you. So makes you feel better. I'm not sure, but it was important for me anyway, and I know it's been important for a lot of people to just be able to ring up and have a chat, I suppose.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the things we've been encouraging within the GTC, to make sure people keep in contact with people by phone and not always maybe on Zoom and things, but just having those discussions and trying to, you know, get to talk to people who are local or in the same boat as yourself really helps. Let's bring in Hannah now. Hannah Dimitrovic, who's a consultant working with producers, distributors, and broadcasters globally to develop, finance, and produce factual content. Hannah's been a commissioning editor at National Geographic Channels International and also at BBC Global Channels. At TCB Media Rights, she was the first commissioning editor hired within a distributor, and she was pioneering their distributor-led commissioning. So, Hannah, welcome to our little GTC chat. It's lovely to see you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, yeah, what are your feelings so far on what we've been talking about, and how things are going currently in this industry?
Yeah, well, it's actually an interesting one for me because I spent the last couple of months sort of bringing myself back up to speed with the industry, because I had my second baby during lockdown last year. So I've spent the last couple of months sort of getting back up to speed and talking to producers and to distributors and to broadcasters, because as a consultant, I guess I have to have my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the industry. And it's been really fascinating, because I feel like I've sort of re-entered a industry which has kind of had exponential change. It's quite amazing to me. What I left last year in sort of early March, went on maternity leave, and what I've come back to is, you know, is amazing. So I'm happy to share some of those findings with you today. And I guess one of the big things really obviously is COVID, and that has brought a myriad of challenges, as everybody's been discussing so far. But it also seems to have accelerated certain changes that might have otherwise taken, I don't know, 5-10 years, changes that seem to have happened now in like the last 8 months. So I think one of the big things, of course, is that there's now even more ways than ever to watch your content. The executive changes at broadcasters have been like phenomenal. As they pivoted towards digital, they've been making a lot of changes. And so I think actually some of the changes that we've seen are definitely for the good. Although kind of the constant Zooming and video calls, it can be quite draining for people. It has actually meant that you can get better access to decision makings. They suddenly seem to have they suddenly seem to have more time, be more willing to speak to people, more opportunities to pitch with different networks. But also for a production company point of view, you can now hire people that are kind of spread out around the country and around the world. So the consulting work that I'm doing at the moment, I'm working for PBS, who are based in Boston in the States, but also for a production company in Leeds. So I'm not sure those two things would have been possible this time last year. But of course, there are obviously ongoing challenges, and as it's been referenced, it's been a really tough time for freelancers. And I think particularly for like linear television, the ad sale, you know, even though people have been watching more TV than ever, the ad sale market is really challenged, and that is bringing obviously sort of budget issues to certain broadcasters, but also there's just a lot of uncertainty out there which doesn't make for great risk taking at broadcasters. They sometimes they're kind of unsure as to what their audience will want to watch in 6-8 months time, because where will we be? Will we be in lockdown? Won't we? What will the mood be? So there's lots of opportunity and great change, but it's tempered with quite a lot of uncertainty at the same time, I think.
You touched upon it briefly there, but do you think the COVID has really changed people's watching patterns? In that, personally, I think linear TV is like really sketchy now, in that most people are watching box sets, either Netflix or Amazon or many other streaming things, or even YouTube. And how does that affect you in your job for pitching and getting the stuff?
I think, yes, I think it has. Again, COVID has accelerated change. So, you know, whilst people didn't have much to do, they were watching TV and they were consuming it, you know, in great quantities. So the rise of the streamers is continuing. It's unstoppable. Obviously, Disney Plus launched during, I think, March last year, so which was possibly the best £59 I ever spent, which because my daughter spent a lot of time watching it while I held a newborn baby. So, but Disney Plus has been massive. Discovery have brought their streamer launch early, I guess, to capitalise on everything that's been going on. So yeah, I think because the way that people watch content on these streamers then trickles down to their expectations of linear TV as well. So that's why you can see sort of the BBC, Channel 4, ITV have all recently had big sort of structural changes to make sort of digital first and foremost in their strategy. So it's the commissioning teams at BBC is now a sort of iPlayer first, or iPlayer is sort of baked into everything that they do, because as an audience your expectation is that you want to watch everything as a box set, and it has to have those kind of filmic great storytelling and glossy look that a big streamer box set will have too. So yeah, it's definitely changed expectations, but then also in terms of competition, obviously a lot of these streamers have a lot of money to spend. They haven't been affected as much by sort of a crashing ad market as your Channel 4s and ITVs have. So then it's how can our beloved linear channels compete with these big streamers? So I think, so from my point of view, what I've seen a lot of, having spent quite a lot of time in distribution recently, is I've started to see, particularly in factual, which is my sort of area of expertise, and specialist factual and popular factual, a lot more sort of global collaboration with networks. So a lot more openness to co-production than there perhaps has been in recent years. So people coming together to realise that actually co-production can be great. You can come together on some really ambitious projects, and they're not quite as painful as I guess the perception of them can be. And you can therefore have a bit of a mixed economy in your commissioning budget. So you can still commission your very sort of UK-centric big budget pieces, but then you can also, to maximise your hours, to get more hours out of your budget, if you come together with a kind of like-minded collection of broadcasters around the world, then there's more to be made. And I think you will see more of this. I mean, it's happened in drama for a long time, but I think it's a kind of new and ongoing trend in faction, and we'll see more of it, even with distributors starting to fund content. So that's what I started doing a little bit of pre-COVID. This was kind of happening a little bit because the demand for factual content is so high, and I think has been accelerated even further by COVID. But so now distributors, I think, will start to be seen less as a kind of money people and more as sort of creative and editorial partners, as they work further upstream with producers to generate content, fund it and get it made to then be able to sell to broadcasters. So I think you'll see a lot of creative ways of getting content funded in the future.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it's certainly played into the hands of the streaming giants at the moment, and I think ITV and BBC maybe have quite a bit of catch up to do, because if you look at their evening schedules, for instance, you'll see programs that you go, oh yeah, no, I've already watched that because I watched it all in one go on iPlayer or on catch up. So just a reminder, guys, there are questions and answers available. Just you can put them in if you want us to ask anything to any of the people in this first session that we're having. So there's Hannah at the moment, but also if you've got any questions for Ollie, Marcus, or Will, please feel free to put them then. Where do you think next year will be a bumper year for us, though? Hannah, do you think once this is out of the way, there'll just be a raft of money suddenly available?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but there certainly is a massive demand for content. I think it's like I think everyone is sort of raring to go. And it's a project that I've been working on for PBS at the moment. I spoke to quite a lot of broadcasters to sort of find out what they wanted and what their requirements were. And I think it's just everybody is really keen, particularly after this next lockdown, to basically get out and filming again, but also at the moment sort of find ways to make content that can be created now. Otherwise, there are going to be big gaps in the schedule come summer. So a lot of things can't be made. So broadcasters are particularly looking for ways of creating content that doesn't necessarily rely on filming, which is very much set in the time of COVID, or so particularly people wearing masks and stuff. I've heard that quite a lot. People don't want things to be covered in that, or interviews that are all done over Zoom. So it's tricky, and they're tricky demands because broadcasters want the content, and it's up to producers to come up with sort of creative ways of to make content now that isn't necessarily tied to this time of year. For the production company I'm working for, we're developing new ideas all the time, pitching them in and having great conversations with broadcasters. So it definitely seems like the desire is there, and particularly like a few things that sort of spring to mind. There's definitely a demand for sort of very warm and upbeat formats. So one thing that the sort of linear channels did do well in, I think, during lockdown were sort of cozy viewing. So things like the Repair Shop or Great Pottery Showdown or Bake Off, those things seem to really resonate, and they're looking for more of that, things that sort of a bit like a warm hug I keep hearing. So nostalgic, warm feeling formats. And then I think the demand for travel, as soon as international travel is allowed, then I think there's going to be a big boom in travel logs, people wanting travel logs, because I think everybody wants to see some sort of beautiful sunny skies and a little bit of escapism, which is another word that I hear a lot. And yeah, as well as that, sort of true crime box sets, that's another thing I hear a lot of that, because that's quite retrospective, that can be made at the moment. So people are kind of finding ways around doing that. So again, it's just sort of mixture of what can be made now and then planning ahead for the future.
And it's interesting, isn't it, the number of different things that come out that you don't expect, like the little phase we had a while back with slow TV, where people would just happily sit and watch reindeer going through forests or trains going forever. And it's the sort of thing that, as you say, maybe is just comfort, warm things that
exactly, yeah,
bring something that you haven't got at the moment. So guys, if we could just bring everyone else back in, Marcus and Ollie and Will. Does anyone have any questions for each other on this before we close this first session?
Can I make a point? I know that when we're filming, when we're out filming and then it goes into the edit, Marcus, how you found, I don't know whether or not you've come across this, but obviously legal within the broadcasters now, it's sort of like it's the legal requirement to make sure that people look like they're social distancing on screen. I know we see a lot of it on the news, but how does that sort of dictate any experience of any of the programs that you've been working on? Has it been a problem? Has it, how's it been?
It just creates new filming parameters within commercials and television. Ollie and I shot a commercial for Lloyd's Bank with Giles Bandruff and Dave Maureen Littman, and they're 72 and 70 respectfully, and we, as Vulnerables, chose to shoot it in his kitchen, and it was around his kitchen table, and they filmed Gogglebox there, so they were already in a bubble. So they could be close together, but we were at distance to them. So we shot it very long lens through doorways and windows, and then had a remote camera. So it made us shoot that conversation well, but they were still, again, had to be face to face, 2 meters apart. And because the table was the real table, it allowed that, so it worked. Big Zoos, Big Eats that I've done with S&O is the main 3 protagonists are best mates, so they're always together. But because it's the delivery of food to other people who aren't, we do shoot that at on a long table at distance, but still keep our kind of like lensy close-ups in there. So I think it's horses for courses, basically, Will, depending on what the broadcaster needs. But I think you can still be safe and keep that creativity that was there pre-COVID.
I think it's interesting as well, because I think both, it was either Will or Ollie or both of you commented earlier on when you were filming now with COVID. We know that we can use different lenses and foreshorten stuff, but it's interesting that then that might become an edit issue, an issue in the edit, or an issue once the program goes out, where you go, oh, they weren't that far apart, and yet we're trying to use, if you like, camera trickery or lens use to sorry, I seem to have disappeared. No, I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, we use stuff to try and make it look as though people are closer together, even though they're not. And sometimes we get penalised for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if I may, I think I know I've been working on with George Clark over the last year and bits, and obviously that's going into people's homes using sliders and jibs and Ronins, the whole sort of the whole package, as it were. And you've got, sometimes people's rooms are not that big, so trying to social distance, having to then actually coming up to a point with Marcus, you were saying that actually now productions are now having to think ahead more carefully. So now when I get on set and I start talking to the director, we start now thinking about where we're going to. I know it sounds simple, and I know a lot of productions do this anyway, but be able to think about what you're going to film before you go and film it. And that's become brilliant for me and for everyone on set, to be able to film safely, to let everybody know, even people who've never been on TV before, to be able to give them that understanding of where we're going to stand. People filing into a room and then filing out again in the same order. So yeah, you're right. That whole situation has been sort of for me has improved.
Yeah, I think that moving forward, we have a couple of ADs that me and Ollie work with quite a lot, and bringing an AD into a television scenario whereby the idea is about safety and planning and protocols pre-shoot, makes the shoot more exact. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. It is a cost factor, but I think that cost equals double safety. So bringing in that extra level of, and all the ADs we work with are all COVID supervisor tested and ready to go. So if there's no supervisor there, they can exact that role. I think that taking a little bit of that commercial exactness and bringing it into television at a minimal cost is not a bad thing at all. Graham, I had a question for Hannah, if that's possible.
Sure, of course it is. Far away.
Hannah, I was just going to ask that, do you feel that, and you were talking about the streamers, from the conversations that I've been privy to, I feel that the streamers are still very, very interested in, dare I say it, British ideas. As in, British ideas tend to be big, quite big, and inventive and different, and also translatable for an American audience and an international audience. During the COVID times, and I'm sure you're talking to a lot of broadcasters via Zoom, but when you're talking to the streamers, because you're British as well, does that bring anything to your idea base and the way that you're perceived, as it's coming from a kind of, a British creative mind?
Yeah, I would say so, definitely. I think that the UK, particularly for formats, is still looked to as like the creative powerhouse in terms of like inventive and different and original formats. And it wasn't something that the streamers like Netflix really started off doing, but you've definitely seen in the last couple of years them starting to get into some of these more sort of constructed reality formats. So Netflix doing their own version of The Circle, for example, outside of the UK. So yeah, I think that the UK is still and will continue to be looked to for original and creative ideas. Not necessarily taking the UK version of it and airing it on those streamers, but I think adapting it globally is pretty appealing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions between you guys?
Yeah, it wasn't so much a question. Before we came on this, Will and I were sort of discussing mental health, and it's something obviously I realise I've been in the freelance world and now sort of running a company and actually having young staff, people who you're sort of trying to get through and train, so that, you know, they come into S&O and they start as camera assistants, and hopefully they eventually leave as either camera operators. Some leave early as, you know, focus pullers, and or just freelance camera assistants. But I'm currently sort of doing all of the staff. It's the beginning of the year. I'm doing the staff personal development reviews, and something that came up a lot last year, and it kind of happened around about the start of COVID, and was a lot of freelance cinematographers called me and could tell that obviously the drop off of work was something that was affecting them, but also something that is also affecting people is social media and sort of portrayals of how much work people are getting. And so Will sort of said, you might phone people and kind of see how busy people are. And obviously, when you are friends with those people, you're going to get an honest answer. But you know, nowadays you can go on Instagram and follow every cinematographer, every director. I think it's important, depending on what stage of your career you're at, to kind of find a balanced viewpoint. I'm fairly happy with where my career is going, the level of work I do, but I can still go on and see some amazing stills from a shoot and go, why aren't I filming stuff like that? I could do that. And it's important that you still balance and look at what you're doing. Don't believe everything that you see on social media. Just find where you're going, find your path, always look at your skills rather than everyone else's, and define yourself. And that is the sort of thing. Now, social media won't get you employed. It might get you sort of a few more people following you, but your skill level and your creativity is the thing that's going to carry you through for, you know, the rest of your freelance career.
I think that's a very fair point, Ollie, as well. And what people don't realise as well is a lot of people make their one job that they've had stretch out for an awful lot of posts over a lot of months when they're actually not doing anything, if you look at it carefully. So, I think there's a lot of it to be taken with a pinch of salt. There's always going to be people out there that are doing stuff you like, but that's only the same as, you know, when you watch some of the stuff Will's been doing with Joanna Lumley and you go, I'd have loved to have gone to Cuba with Joanna Lumley. Why didn't I get that gig?
Yeah, but I think sometimes you have to be a little bit mindful about what you post. Exactly what Ollie's saying is that whole situation of just going, now, who am I posting this for? Am I posting it to say that I'm doing this job? Are you posting other social events on that feed so it sort of gets a bit mucked up? Am I telling about my life? So a lot of the time, I work thing rather than anything else. I think it's important that you make sure you don't start rubbing other people's noses. During the lockdown, I think it was quite difficult when you saw DOPs posting, going, "Hey, I'm working." You're going, well, you're probably the 1% that is, and I don't know whether or not it's responsible. It's great for them, and you look at it and go, okay, that's I should be doing something. I should be working hard. I should be ringing people and doing so. I feel a little bit guilty now that I'm not actually working like he is, but ultimately, yeah, I think we just have to be more responsible sometimes about posting jobs when knowing that other freelancers don't have any work.
No, absolutely. I think it's that's very important, and I think there's different ways that people post as well, because I think one of the other things that people are always very aware of on some of the forums and things is when people start asking for information on like, or where can I get this, or can anyone help me source these lights or this rig or whatever, are people posting just to say I've got this gig, or are they posting because they really need the help to find it? I think there's different people post in different ways, and you just have to be aware and try not to get affected by it.
I think on that note,
how yeah, go on. Sorry,
I was just going to say that no. Well, I was just going to say that I probably post most on most social media today about this conversation that we're all having than I think I have about a job or a creative or a commercial in a long time, because I think that this is a very positive way for us all to move forward exponentially, and also, you know, creatively and together, you know, as a creative unit, creative and business unit. And you know, posting about something about this conversation today and telling others that we're having this conversation, the GTC is holding these conversations, is a very positive thing to shout about. I think you just got to be careful what you shout about.
Yeah. Hannah, how much is social media important in your work?
Oh, it's interesting actually. I'm not big on social media. I say the main thing for my work is probably LinkedIn, rather than sort of showing nice pictures on Instagram. It's probably making connections that way, really. And then people sort of seeing what you're up to and getting in touch and asking, you know, just being interested in the projects that you're working on and seeing if you can help them out. So for me, it's probably slightly more dull.
All right, well, guys, I think we should call it a day there. So thank you so much for being part of our first part of the first broadcast that we've done with this GTC Roundtable. Ollie, Marcus, Will, and Hannah, thank you all for being in part one. Part two, we've got Laura, Nick, Matt, and Klaus coming up. I'll introduce them more fully when we get there. Lots more things to talk about, and don't forget that hopefully you'll be able to watch this second part after this short break, and also questions and answers are more than welcome. So once again, thanks guys for being with us this afternoon, and good luck, stay safe.